say that this is a great text that has virtually no failings as an opener. Bulletproof is how we describe it. The essence of the argument I see is it's about a radical descent from the dominant form of publicness. And what does that mean? And publicness defines the discursive situation that defines how a given group understands what counts as art. And therefore, if we have a history of art, it seems persuasive to argue that it involves also a compelling and carefully described history of publicness. And then the question that Lütticken is working on in broad strokes is the question of scale. Is it to be very broad in general in the same way that he is? Is bigger better? Are certain aspects of being small and maintaining a defined group that works on ever thicker description seems to be a component that one can relate to the critical achievement of art at certain moments, and also in forms of publicness that tend to achieve greatly over time, but over long periods of time. He uses the example of early Christianity. You could use the example of Bolshevism in Russia. Very tightly knit unit focused around intense questioning of a discrete situation. So I would say that the redistribution of the sensible is a great thing when it takes place within a smaller group. This is used as a counter-public. This term is, Michael Warner's term, the counter-public is frequently mobilized. I'm not sure how useful or non-useful it is, but it's usually the term deployed for this. I tend to think that it's a global phenomenon in the time period that we have described, to see small groups of people who describe works of art. This is a global phenomenon that largely develops in contradistinction to the global phenomenon of postmodernism. Almost in every local situation, I would argue globally, outside of Western Europe of America, you have a local thick describer group, and then you have a group that's trying to plug into a global postmodernism. You can say that I'm wrong, but I'm still right. The most dominant text today, which Lütticken relies on, the one that you will never hear anyone contradict, is Boltanski and Chiapella. I defy anyone on stage who would like to contradict this argument. I would love to hear it. It's the one argument that is always there, and these are the terms that I completely reject from Lütticken's argument: a perverted, dystopian, corrupted avant-garde. None of those adjectives for me are particularly useful. But he does relate the idea that an avant-garde is taking place, but that avant-garde is taking place within the structures of capitalism. That is the avant-garde that we're dealing with today. Most people around the world during this time frame were dealing with different varieties of socialist realism. That was the dominant form of visuality within art between 1975 and 1995. And in that sense, Neue Slowenische Kunst in Slovenia is probably the most compelling expression of psychoanalysis and Marxism during the time period. Lütticken is part of these revisionist generalizers, Greuze, Zizek. They make gross generalizations, have a very faulty, if non-existent, grasp of actual historical situations, but some of those broad strokes really do work, and I would suggest that some of this works. I'm much more inclined to say that, based on Lütticken's argument, the discursive situation around works of art yields something closer to a series of complexes. There's an October complex. It involves artists, theorists, various people who are connected, who aren't theorists or artists, and you'd say have an open university, art and language complex. You have a series of different complexes which tend, I would say, to bleed the borders between who is an art producer and who's a discourse producer. So I'm much more inclined to say that Hal is some kind of artist who works in discourse performance in a way that we still haven't fully described yet. But we will soon, I bet. Religion is probably a crucially repressed term. We get this in Lütticken. And it is advanced socialism's absolute achievement globally is that it stamped out and destroyed religion. Spectacle is always bad, or at best irrelevant. Art and life is a distinction that I definitely want to hold on to, because I do think that art and life tends to be a term that takes on meaning when one can be criminally prosecuted for producing different forms of art. It becomes less so, I think, in situations that are not akin to this. I should not be here. Julia Bryan-Wilson should be here instead of me, because she has an incredibly compelling argument about occupational realism that I really think should be part of this argument, which relates back to Caprow and Andy Warhol. And I reject Lütticken's arguments that implicitly align Caprow and Warhol with a failed avant-garde, or one that I believe he describes as not genuinely radical in its practice. Those are the quick things I want to say.